Really excited to introduce my comrade, my sister, my deeply beloved Dr. Noor Jones-Bey. We have had the opportunity to lead a number of really powerful communities of practice together. And the most recent was this offering here that she will be supporting us in kind of exploring the possibility of a professional development that is rooted in uh, an appreciation for and an honoring of our full humanities as educators in a school space. And so it's with great joy and excitement that I hand this space over to you, Dr. Noor Jones-Bey, um, and we're in for a treat.
Hey, thank you, Oriana. I have to also agree with everyone's deep love and appreciation. This has been, I think about how so much of our growth is always happening in relationship, in conversation, in community. And she is someone who has always been a thought partner, a dreamer, and a visionary. And when we talk about this liminal space, this is an offering for us to start finding partners in this work, folks who can see our true humanity, see the links between our professional and our personal, who will notice, who will slow down and remind us of who we are, or even ask the question so that we get curious about who we really are. So I want to thank Oriana for being that person in my life for almost more than a decade. And I want to just thank you so much for creating the space. And I want to thank everyone who's here today for bringing your full selves. Already just moving into the chat, I recognize how many of us are really pulled to this space because we need each other in this particular way. And there's wisdom here that each of us bring that another one may need to hear. So I just want to thank you all so much for being so vocal in the ways that you feel called. And really being vulnerable in your humanity just so far. That is the work. That is the work. It's that constant dialogue with ourselves. So thank you so much for this space. And I want to just get started really honoring a person who has been a mentor and who I've never met, but I'm a person who loves books. They have guided me and they've been mentors and teachers, but also ancestors for me. So I want to start this session recognizing that a big part of the work that I do has been grounding myself not only in kind of listening to folks in real time, but also slowing down to find connections to ancestors through art, through writing, through music, through my senses. And I hope for our time together to be the beginning of a kind of dialogue that is, and I call it a diasporic dialogue, something that allows our full body to connect to those places of wisdom that we carry. And we move in a society that says, hey, that's not that important, put that away. And our work in acknowledging our humanity is saying, no, I'm going to pick that back up. That's a huge part of who I am. That is something that sustains me. And you might not be able to see it right now, but I know. And so part of that journey for me has grown out of the work with Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And I'll begin our session just with sharing some of her words. I'll also put them in the chat, but I will also be moving through this space, providing words of teachers who are both ancestors, who are both present. And I hope for you to give yourself space to sit with them. Feel free to write in the chat if you feel compelled to share what's speaking to you. But I want to start off with these words. Practice listening to your intuition, your inner voice. Ask questions, be curious, see what you see, hear what you hear, and then act upon what you know to be true. These intuitive powers were given to your soul at birth. I'll also put this link in the chat so you're able to read this again. But as we move through our next session and we can move to the next slide, I hope that we take this as our practice for today. So I want to come and just share a little bit about who I am. I come from the background of both being, I always laugh because I'm like both in and out of school. So I've worked in after school programs, helping young people with their schoolwork. I've worked as a college access director, helping young folks move through intense anxieties and stresses around applying for school. I've run critical literacy programs, so teaching the word and the world. And now the work that I do is really grounding and building resources to support folks who have experienced sexual assault and domestic violence, right? And so recognizing how in so much of our work, these are human things, folks moving through human experiences that are also very much intergenerational. And so I come here honoring just the way that I think intergenerationally. I come from a long lineage of hardcore West Indians and Black Americans. So I really grand, like all of my thinking, I connect those back to Black women and girls and gender expensive folks who are creative and the ways that they think in their past and the present and the future. And that inspires my work always, particularly as an educator or working in these spaces where grief was always happening, that I needed to tap into a literature, a song, a movement, something that reminded me of another feeling other than intense, overwhelming grief, right? And so this historical legacy is one that I always carry with me in this work. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important to listen across time and space, to allow ourselves to have mentors of all ages, all backgrounds, all ways of seeing and knowing the world. And so as we enter in this space, one of my other mentors is Amy Meredith Cox. She's someone that I've listened to, and she says, "Come as you are, feel what you want, and be what you need." And these were words that I needed when I was an educator. These are the words when every morning felt like I was a first responder to everything. And I shared this with Ori a lot. There's times where I'm still reminding myself that I don't have to immediately be, 5 different jobs when I signed up for one. That there's a space for me to slow down and really pay attention to what my purpose is. And so as we move into this workshop, I just want to ask you really that question, right? What are you holding? What are you feeling right now? What is kind of the emotional status of where you are? And just giving yourself a moment to pause. Are we feeling a little bit everywhere? Are we coming in here with some good ideas that are giving us some joy? Are we feeling a lot of grief today, right? But just giving ourselves a moment to say, we're always worth slowing down for that. So we'll move into our next slide. And I just want to thank you so much already for your attention. And one of the big parts of this work that Ori and I developed was creating a space for educators and teachers to really share their experience. The liminal space was also a space to share our dreams, in addition to the things that caused us pain, sadness, and questioned the work that we're doing. And so we're going to get started with the mind stretch as we usually do in this. And the quote is, "It is imperative that I teach for liberation and humanize learning by making space for students to express their joy and process their trauma." And so this is the moment where I'll ask, what do you want to make space for in your school? And feel free to just take a second or so and feel free to drop it in the chat. What is something that you really want to add to the school environment that you're working in? Or if it's not a school, an organization. And I think about this emotionally in some ways. I recognize oftentimes the work I did, I would come home still exhausted. And a big part of my work has really been reclaiming joy, reclaiming where I can still touch into it in a place of pain or sorrow or loss, and realizing that they oftentimes speak together. So thank you for those who are in the chat. Roberta says, "Healing and peace for my school." Nicole says, "Express their joy and process their trauma." That's that duality. Yes, Nicole, that is that duality. It is always happening, right? And sometimes we're in spaces where we only see the trauma, and there's the wholeness that we're working for, right? Christine says, "I want to be an explicit model of grief and joy as a natural and healing part of the human experience." Yes, Christine. Rana, "A culture where well-being, belonging, and excellence are equally valued for both staff and students." Jennifer says, "I want to make space for humanizing learning and working. It's easy for us to get task-oriented and forget what people are bringing with them on a daily basis." See, again, the dream is in the chat already, y'all. The dream is in the chat. And then candor, or Dimitri says candor and trust. Sherry says trust and student as leaders of work. Janelle shares, I want to make space for community and familial healing that is deep, profound, and normed. And I'm going to keep moving. Y'all continue to read in the chat. Please continue to put in these visions. You are with the people who are going to make these real. You're with the people who will find the practices that will allow us to keep remembering that these are our visions amid incredible loss, right? So we'll move to, here we go. If we can move to, we have another slide, but it's okay. I can move from here. So noticing and naming, one of the ways that I think when we're coming back to our intuition is starting to really actually slow down and see what our society has said is normal in the ways that we work. And then what our intuition, or that deeper wisdom, when we talk about that ancestral wisdom that says, no, that's actually harmful. We should not be doing that. And that's always a place of tension oftentimes in schools, because we're recognizing the procedures that we've been taught, and then we're honoring the wisdom, the ancestral connections, the joy, the dream that we see is in opposition. So we'll keep going. If we can. And this is where I think about bell hooks. I also think about Fannie Lou Hamer. And Fannie Lou Hamer said one of the reasons why she never hated a person was because she could remember these places of joy with her family. That there was this type of like healing energy that allowed her to remember moments from when she was a young person that helped her to do all of the work that she did. The incredible work had so much to do with those memories and those spaces of connection. And so bell hooks speaks a little bit about this importance of creating a classroom that allows community to happen versus community being this thing that we say, oh, now we are. Community is a practice, it's a process. She says, I enter the classroom with the assumption that we must build community in order to create a climate of openness and intellectual rigor. Rather than focusing on issues of safety, I think that a feeling of community creates a sense that there's a shared commitment and common goal that binds us. And I pause in this moment to say, look at the chat. This is a moment where community is being developed and built as we come out to share. Bell Hooks writes, what we all ideally share is the desire to learn, to receive actively knowledge that enhance our intellectual development and our capacity to live more fully in the world. It has been my experience that one way to build community in the classroom is to recognize the value of each individual voice. And so if we're not creating spaces within our classrooms, let alone our school rooms, houses, whatever that is, we are not creating a space for folks to be individually themselves, but even be in touch with their intuition, as we talked about before. And so as we move into this next space, we're going to move into a where we think a little bit more about our desire, but I want us to also reflect on what is our school culture right now. And so if you haven't already, this is a place where you can go ahead and include some of the desires that you have for your school community. You can go ahead and include those in here. But what do you desire? The way Bell Hooks said, I want a space for folks to share their individual voice. What are some things that you feel like your school community or your students or your colleagues, something that you wish that they were able to build or have, right? Kelly shares, I love this. I want to co-create spaces where people feel free to be joyful, passionate, silly, deeply serious, and open about their questions, right? Kelly, the way you even just described that makes me think of what we just shared with Bell Hooks' idea of what it is to actually build community or be community in practice, where we can actually hear each other. Kayla says, a space to show up authentically, to wash out, breathe out, and breathe in, creating a physical space more than just an intention within, right? And so it's this place where our voices are heard, the ways that we show up are valued, and we're allowed to actually really just be, right? And so what does that take? Recognizing that we're in systems that are inherently violent, or, you know, in some ways we have intergenerational trauma from moving in and out of these school spaces, right? So what does it require for us as educators to remember a different way of learning? What does it require for us to build a different kind of relationship with young people, with our colleagues? What things must pivot and shift? What must we call out? What must we name? What must we notice? And some of us are walking with that from our own personal experiences, and you walk in the classroom and you feel it, and you do what you can to try to shift it, but it's still hurting, right? Still having that piece. Kelly says that's not coincidental. Bell Hooks has had been formative in my relationship to love and learning, right? And so this comes to the point around: have we been in relationship with folks? Do we need a larger community, folks who maybe we never were able to speak with, but they have really transcended and moved into our hearts and helped us to build our own ways of being. And so that's what our session is all about, is being able to really support multiple voices to come to the fore. So if we can, I want to go ahead and push over to the next slide so we can get into thinking a little bit about what it means to slow down, to name and notice what is, so that we can make some really critical pivots in our school space. And so Oriana and I, we've been like playing with this idea of like, what does it mean to do humanizing professional development? And we realized a huge part of particularly working in school spaces was the fact that oftentimes we're moving at a pace that never allows us to slow down. We're always responding to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And we were dreaming, what would it mean if we were actually able to have this space where we could actually just process what happened? We can just say the thing. And that was one of the things that was characteristic of our experiences working in schools, and realizing that we had to make it ourselves. And so a part of this offering that we're going to move into, and I'll explain more about in the coming months, is giving educators a space to examine, embrace, and challenge our many identities, the things that pop up. Our child self jumps into the classroom. Sometimes we're triggered by a situation that happens. There's intense, violent, political, like, and social, emotional, like, tense violence. There's all these things, right? And your brain is just overwhelmed. What happens when you move into a space where you're allowed to like feel it, and then also identify what are the things that you can do tomorrow in your practice to help hold yourself, but also create ground for the young people, but also the community that you're working within? And so we decided that noticing and naming those things is actually the essential part. And you usually can't do that just by yourself. It's really important to do that in a group. And so our idea behind this is just identifying that, like, teachers coming together to share communal spaces, we will then bring together a lot of sustaining frameworks to help us in this work. And so that's a little bit of the work that we'll do. And so for the next 5 minutes, we're going to move into kind of doing a little bit of that. And I just want us to be in this space and just notice and name what are three characteristics that are present in your current PD? What are some things that you're noticing? So feel free to look through here and just identify three, and you can drop them in the chat. Let's think about your school culture or your organizational culture around PD. What does that look like, feel like? Okay. And we'll give ourselves some space. Thank you for those who are sharing in the chat. We notice that there's some defensiveness, some singular thinking, power hoarding happening, collaboration, connection, supportive for some folks, responsiveness, fear of open conflict. Ooh, that's a real one. Quality over quantity over quality, authenticity, intersectionality, collaboration, scarcity culture, singular thinking, quantity over quality. That's all happening. worship of the written word, fear of open conflict, collaboration, a sense of urgency, singular thinking, right? And so I want to appreciate y'all for uplifting these and continue to do so in the chat. A big part of it is just allowing us to say what we're experiencing. And some of those things are oftentimes what stops us from really being able to be honest and authentic in who we are as we show up to the workplace, because we already know that certain ways of being will not be listened to, respected, or pushed away, right? Singular thinking. We're a whole group of folks. Why are we only thinking in one way, right? So I want us, as we move forward, we're going to move into kind of a collective journal activity. Thank you. Paternalism. Oof. Y'all, all of us we can really name it. We can say it, right? We're going to move into a collective journal activity, which allows us to kind of sit with those three characteristics that you identified, right? And I want you to go ahead and give yourself some space. And this collective journal that I'm going to drop into the chat is anonymous, so we won't know who's writing. But a part of releasing and naming is being able to write it out, say it out, release it, express it. And so I want you to give yourself some time to think about, if you said paternalism, if you said scarcity culture or fear of open conflict, what does that look like? What is an experience that connects to it? And then give yourself a little time. We'll do about 10 minutes. We're going to play a song. It's one of my favorite songs right now. It's called Alma by Omar Sosa. And for me, the creative is always one of the most important places for us to go to be able to move from naming to being able to shifting, right? And so just give yourself this time to just free write. There's no problem with like writing perfectly. This is about just getting it out, expressing it, and being able to find some of the resonances that are happening in this group. So if you're done writing, if you're not, keep going, keep flowing. Feel free to highlight. You're welcome to do this in here. You can highlight something that you are, or put a smiley face. You can share some love if you're like, oh my gosh, you said something that, yes, this resonates. I'm feeling this. I'm experiencing this. And a big part of humanizing professional development is being able to say the thing and being able to be validated and having other folks to see that experience and being able to say, you're not alone, right? Like this is the baseline of the work, is being able to say you're not alone. You're not crazy, right? In so many ways that folks have made us feel as if we were crazy for pointing out things that we felt, was not supporting of our humanity or our growth, our wholeness. So I'm going to go ahead and just start. I'm going to pause for a second in the case anyone feels comfortable or wants to share about like what that felt like to just get it all on the page. So if you want, you can go ahead and write that in the chat, or if you want to come off mute to share just what are you feeling now, just saying the thing.
I really appreciated this activity. And I'm just reminded of how often we stick to the narrative of, virtual is so disconnected and where we can't find ways to support each other and be in community. And something like this is such a tangible, accessible way that we can do that we can be creative and push back and still show up for one another, even in a virtual space.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
I agree with what I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, what the last speaker just said. And I think it's interesting because it's not incredibly dissimilar to the chat when you think about it, but there's something qualitatively different about it to go onto a document and to call it a journal and to, I don't know, I found myself saying a lot more than I would have if I was just popping in the chat. And I want to think about why that is, but it's different.
That's an important thing to say. We might not know. Maybe sometimes I think it's the anonymous nature of it, where you don't have to think about, what other people are thinking. You're just letting it, being free and naming it. That's my first thought, but I don't know either. So hopefully we can figure this out together. Also share in the chat. And I really appreciate you uplifting this, because sometimes this is true when I journal as well. I feel more aware of my stress and my nervousness. So at the moment I actually feel worse. And sometimes that's what the noticing part and naming part, that's the first reaction. Sometimes we think the healing, it's like gonna feel really good. It's like, yes, release. Sometimes it's like, actually this smells. I hate this. Like, why did I do this to myself? I just wanted a sunny day, right? But there's some power to allowing ourselves to sit in like, I'm actually aware of how bad it's been feeling. Oh my gosh, I recognize the stress that has been weighing on me. And this is untenable. The nervousness that is stopping me from being able to engage with myself at this moment makes my heart break. And when we slow down for those feelings of negativity that also come up, this is a part of the attuning. This is a part of the, like, of sitting to say, I deserve a renewal. When we talk about that, it's returning to who we are. It's being able to release, let go, name the things or the protectors or the barriers that we have built up, the coping mechanisms to move through, to survive. And a part of that honors the yuckiness that we've been moving with, the heavy, the grief, the pain, the anger, the honest truth that we're taught to pretend is not there as it's right with us. So Nicole, I really appreciate you saying that, because this is a part of the work. This is exactly the work. And if anyone says it's all light and sun, no, you're usually, if you're going to do your healing work, you're feeling like you're getting punched. Because there's a whole bunch of like real talk with yourself now about, yeah, the meditation felt good, but now what do I actually need to do? I still feel like crap and I've been changing things for 7 days, 7 months. What's the next thing, right? How do I return back to myself for that intuition, for that wisdom that we all carry? And that's the thing that I really believe deeply, is that we all carry that wisdom of what it looks like to heal and what it looks like to be whole, what it looks like to feel joy. And we know that because we watch children. We have to remember that. We have to mine through it. And so I just appreciate your honesty right now, because sometimes it can feel good. Other times it's like, ah. So and that's one of the reasons why people are like, I don't want to do this. I realize I'm just to move through time, but thank you for uplifting that. And that's literally what our space is also about, is to say the wisdom y'all carry just in your honesty always moves our space to somewhere really powerful, more than we could have ever anticipated. So thank you for your presence in these moments. I want to pause also to ask if there's anyone who wants to share before we kind of do a quick review of anything that they named, that they were like, yo, we need to address this. Is there anyone who wants to share a piece of their writing? Because I also think your voices are deeply powerful. Like the beginning of the Bell Hooks says it, Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes says it, but this piece of actually hearing ourselves, hearing each other, is healing. It's medicine too. But no pressure. Okay, so I'm going to start reading to you. If you decide you're interested, please let me know. We have some highlights. Worship of the written word manifests by not making room to adjust the rules based on the circumstances and nuances of what we're feeling, what we're experiencing. Collaboration exists in that there are many different opportunities for team members to connect and to learn from each other. Fear of open conflicts looks like agreeing to disagree and committing instead of talking through the why behind certain things. So this pushing beyond understanding and saying, you don't really need to know, just follow, right? When actually the need for us to slow down and for us to actually feel in community is for folks to slow down and make sure that we're understanding and that we also can contribute to the path that we're being asked to take, right? Another person shares, it's disheartening for me that there were what I perceive are negative words associated with PD. PD should be a time of invigoration, coming together for support and for the children that we serve. And I'm just going to jump to this question. If we aren't modeling this for our teachers, then how are we to expect that they do the same with their students, right? So if our PDs are not helping us to collaborate, not helping us to be places where we're invigorated, what are they doing? What are they teaching us? What are we really learning in these spaces? We have another, being talked at and is not effective. It doesn't work with students. It doesn't work with adults either. Completely agree. Completely agree. So then how do we shift it, right? Another person shares a sense of urgency, wanting student assessments to reflect growth. I dream of learning spaces where students are learning and monitoring their needs, where teachers ask students what they value and want to evaluate. I dream of not having to mitigate feelings of compliance and what feels right to me in teaching, right? So this is where we were talking about that tension between the intuition of what it is to do the work within the context that you're doing it, and then also the mandates or the ways that we've been taught that we must teach. Or they say, why are standardized assessments a thing, right? And so I think this piece around, well, how do we move away from standard and move into diverse ways of knowing, being, and seeing, right? I also hear another person shares here, it's not a safe space, which it's okay to ask questions without leadership thinking you're questioning them, and not the content in which they won't use your contributions against you in the future, right? So even would that allow for a learning space, for a humanizing space, if I feel like I can't actually be honest without those being used against me later, or my questions being something that is a negative as opposed to a sign of curiosity and power and deeper engagement with the work, right? So that's real, so real. This person also shares that they lack awareness of what others might need to share through professional development, and end up dominating or insisting their content is more important than others, or more important than what teachers want or need. No one at the leadership level seems to have a comprehensive plan that is responsive to the needs of staff and students. So this also makes me think of a comment around, how do we make our PD breathe in and out? Make it real for us and responsive to connect to what is being said, who's here, who's in the room, what it is to honor that every single one of y'all come with powerful legacies that will teach in this space, in this room, right? So I know I want to honor that we don't have a lot of time to go through each, but I hope that if we're able to really just create some time in your day to just review and also give some love, just give some love to folks who are navigating these circumstances that oftentimes can feel really overwhelming, right? And a big part of what this practice is for us to do together, and I'm going to stop sharing here, and hopefully we can pull up the PowerPoint, is to be able to say that creating spaces, or these liminal spaces, are things we can do easily together. They're tough at some points because they bring up a lot of the heavy emotions and energy, but it's literally so important for us to be able to name what we're experiencing so we can start creatively adjusting those things. So I think we might be at the wrong slide. So moving into our next kind of space, as we really think about this piece around allowing ourselves to name what happens actually allows us to make some pivots, right? And the things that y'all are naming are not new, and you know this, right? But there's a lot of folks who are writing, thinking, dreaming, and creating spaces that are alternatives to this. And so within this offering, Oriana and I have reached out to different folks to get their their writing or their experiences, but also to draw upon the experiences of everyone in the space, right? To help us vision and build this liminal space of reflection, so that we can, like what Sean Ginwright says in this piece, do a fundamental pivot, right? So we need to shift our values, a pivot in how we think, connect, and act and work. And this pivot acknowledges collective harm, right? And this journal that y'all just finished filling speaks to this collective harm. It speaks to the individual injury, but also, and I've noticed in some of folks, what folks are also naming is what they're desiring and hoping for school spaces. So we must be able to hold both of those as we hold pain and as we hold joy, as we hold them and we recognize that duality is always happening, that this means that there's a way to move through. But oftentimes just within the collective, we're able to really build and learn together, right? So we'll move to the next slide. And our last kind of reflection is from another really beautiful author. He says, the times are urgent. Let us slow down. Slowing down is losing our way. not a human capacity or human capability. It is the invitation that are now in the world at large, inviting us to listen deeply, to be keen, to be fresh, to be quick with our heels, to follow the sights and the sounds and the smells of the world. So if anything, the invitation, as I began with the Gloria Pincola Este quote, is less so, we talked about some things, you've shared some things, but an invitation for the rest of this day, but also moving forward, is how can you really slow down to really connect to all of the teachers that are right around you, not even just in the words, in the sounds, in the experiences, and the feelings when they show up, even if they're heavy and hard to notice, or I don't want to. Can we slow down for them? Can we ask, what is the wisdom of them coming to me in this moment, right? And so that's a big part of what this space is for us. And so if we move, oh, great, we are here. So I want to go ahead and allow us some, just a kind of closing moment. I realize we're a little early, which is great. But are there any kind of reflections? And I just want to pause here for folks who are in this space. If you want to come off mute and share a little bit about maybe what you're desiring for, or maybe questions that are coming up as now you're thinking about, if I was going to make PD more humanizing, what would I want? Feel free to come off mic or to add that in the chat.
I think for me, one of the things that's coming up is one of my core responsibilities is providing professional development, particularly around universal design for learning, anti-ableism, and anti-racism. And what someone said earlier about like, how can we expect teachers to do these things if we don't do them for the teachers? And really thinking about, I guess that's where I think about the ways in which the possibilities of universal design offer some entry points for humanization, particularly with their revised guidelines. And that's going to be such a missed opportunity for teachers if we are sharing that content and information with them in ways that dehumanize the teachers themselves. So I'm just playing with that in my head.
Thank you for sharing. Do you have a question or anything you'd like me to respond?
Yeah. Do you have any, sorry, if I missed the cue.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure I'm responding clearly to what
yeah, I guess, so
yeah.
my question with that is, what are some things that you have done? I see them modeled here for us, but are there other things that you feel like that you've done that have kind of created those spaces for a humanized experience?
Yes. I mean, I think one of the big things that has been a teacher for me is actually moving outside of the school space. I think really actually turning my back on a lot of what I learned, right? And a big part of like a lot of my teachers grew from artists and creatives who were sharing knowledge and experiences in out of school spaces, right? Whether that was, programs that were helping young people to write or to be creative or to, I worked with a whole carnival crew who were like generation after generation would say, okay, you might not think you're an actor, but watch yourself, watch who you can become. And so for me, I think the big part is actually allowing ourselves to break, like disruption is really important, paying attention to these moments where what we think we're doing is really good, and then slowing down to be like, what's the problem here, right? And then also connecting to spaces where they inherently just do things differently, where the idea of standards is not what they're working for. They're working towards curiosity and creativity. So then now how do I take that same like framework that I've learned from these out of school spaces to help me then disrupt the standards that have been taught to me around what learning looks like or what it must do, because now I have all these brilliant examples. So what I guess my direct question is, I'm talking to people and I'm learning from different types of educators that people don't recognize as educators. And I will also say that's folks who are on your, what is this? Your sports coach teams. These are folks who you walk by, your secretaries. There are also your creative folks in the after school. But a big part of what has helped me to develop was knowing that I had to develop it in community with people who think and do things differently than I do, but come out with results that are really powerful, that I can see the deepening of the young person's humanity, right? I can see them see their development through the process of whatever that experience it was that they had, right? And so I think a lot around education as experiential, less so around like linear movement, right? And so for me, my first thing would say, go out and talk to people who are doing that work to help young people to become. Sit with them, talk with them, get curious, then return to what you think you know and find ways to disrupt it.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Dr. Jones-Bey. We are really grateful, Noor, for your consistent adjunct faculty role at SCRR. And for those of you who are interested in digging more into humanizing PD, Oriana and Noor will be offering it again this spring, so stay tuned.